They snickered as they pushed her, an ordinary single mother, to sit beside him, the quiet man dismissed as just another struggling dad showing up. It was merely a prank at a crowded gala, where everyone believed these two people had nothing worth saying. But when his eyes swept across the room, when one small detail accidentally slipped out, the atmosphere suddenly shifted. The laughter died. The whispers rose, and then everyone realized they had mocked the wrong person, and the truth behind this man was powerful enough to stun the entire room. The annual Sterling Heights Charity Gala was the kind of event where appearances mattered more than intentions. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across a ballroom filled with designer gowns, tailored suits, and the soft murmur of people who believed their net worth determined their worth as human beings. Lauren Hayes stood near the entrance, smoothing down the front of her department store dress. It was black, simple, appropriate, but it didn't shimmer like the others. She'd borrowed the clutch from her sister. The shoes were 2 years old, resoled twice. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. She'd only received an invitation because her late husband had been a firefighter. The foundation honored first responders annually, and his name was still on their list. She'd almost declined, but the thought of her 8-year-old daughter, Emma, asking why Mommy didn't go to the nice party where Daddy's picture would be shown, that thought had gotten her into the car. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence," came a voice dripping with false sweetness. Lauren turned to see Vanessa Carmichael, a woman who'd once been in her husband's extended social circle. Vanessa's dress probably cost more than Lauren's monthly rent. "Hello, Vanessa. I heard you're working at that diner on 4th Street now." "How?" Quaint. Vanessa's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Must be hard, raising Emma alone." Before Lauren could respond, another voice cut in. "Ladies, we have a seating situation." This was Richard Thornton, one of the event organizers, a man whose self-importance seemed to fill whatever room he occupied. "We're one chair short at table 12, and we need to shuffle some people around." "Put her with the other charity case," Vanessa said, laughing. She gestured toward a man standing alone near the bar. Lauren followed her gaze. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, wearing a suit that fit well but wasn't flashy. His dark hair was neatly combed. He held a glass of water, not champagne. Everything about him was understated. "You mean Daniel?" Richard's eyes lit up with mischief. "Oh, that's perfect. 2 single parents, both here on pity invites. This will be entertaining." "Wait, that's not—" "Oh, come on. It'll be fun," Vanessa interrupted. "You can swap struggling parent stories. Compare food stamp recipes or whatever it is you people do." The group around them laughed, not cruel laughter exactly, but the kind that reduced people to punchlines. Lauren felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to leave. She wanted to tell them exactly what she thought of their casual cruelty. But she also needed to not make a scene, not give them more ammunition, not prove them right about people like her not belonging in places like this. "Fine," she said quietly. Richard personally escorted her across the ballroom, making a show of it. People turned to watch. By the time they reached table 12, at least a dozen people knew about the joke. The man Daniel stood as she approached. His expression was neutral, polite. If he knew he was part of someone's entertainment, he didn't show it. "Ma'am," he said simply, pulling out her chair. Lauren sat, feeling the weight of watching eyes. Richard departed with a smirk. The other seats at their table were conspicuously empty, probably held for people who hadn't arrived yet, or maybe deliberately left vacant to isolate them further. Daniel sat down across from her. He met her eyes briefly, nodded once, and returned his attention to his water glass. Neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavy with everything unspoken. The prank, the judgment, the assumption that 2 people in similar circumstances must be equally irrelevant. Lauren wondered how long she'd have to endure this before she could leave without dishonoring her husband's memory. She had no idea that this quiet man beside her was about to change everything. Lauren had learned to smile through discomfort. It was a survival skill she'd developed over the 3 years since the accident. Before that night, the night the drunk driver ran the red light, the night the phone call came at 2:47 a.m., the night her entire world fractured, she'd been someone else. Someone who laughed easily. Someone who didn't calculate every purchase to the penny. Someone who didn't lie awake, wondering if she was enough for her daughter. Now she was a woman who worked double shifts at Patterson's Diner, who negotiated payment plans with the electric company, who bought Emma's clothes at thrift stores and told her they were vintage treasures to make it sound intentional. She glanced around the ballroom. These people didn't know what it was like to choose between fixing the car's transmission and paying for Emma's dental appointment. They didn't know the particular shame of using coupons while well-dressed women behind you in line made pointed comments about people who abuse the system. Lauren had thought she was past caring what people like Vanessa thought. She'd thought she'd built sufficient armor. But, sitting here, part of someone's joke, she realized the armor had cracks. She studied the man across from her, Daniel. He wasn't what she'd expected. There was something about the way he carried himself, a kind of stillness that suggested he was accustomed to being underestimated. His suit was quality, she realized now that she looked closer. Not expensive in a flashy way, but well-made. His watch was simple, functional. His hands were clean, but showed signs of actual work, not the soft hands of someone who'd never held anything heavier than a pen. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow slightly. "I'm sorry," Lauren said. "I didn't mean to stare. Nothing to apologize for." His voice was deeper than she'd expected. Quiet, but clear. Uncomfortable situation. That's putting it mildly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I've been in worse." Something about the way he said it made her believe him. This wasn't a man who was used to easy circumstances, despite what Vanessa and her crowd might assume. "I'm Lauren," she offered. "Daniel. They said you're a single parent too?" He nodded. "Daughter. She's 10. I have a daughter. Emma. She's 8. Good age," Daniel said. "Old enough to be independent, young enough to still think you're worth talking to." Lauren laughed before she could stop herself. It was the first genuine sound she'd made all evening. "Exactly," she said. "Though Emma has recently discovered sass, I'm not sure where she learned it. Television, probably. Mine watches these shows where 10-year-olds outsmart adults at every turn. Now, she thinks she's a tactical genius." They shared a look of mutual understanding, the kind that exists between people navigating similar waters. "How long?" Lauren asked gently. 4 years. "Cancer. I'm sorry. And you?" 3 years. Car accident." Daniel's expression softened. "The firefighter they're honoring tonight?" "Hayes." "That was your husband." Lauren nodded, not trusting her voice. "He pulled my uncle out of a building fire in 2019, Daniel said quietly. "He didn't have to. The structure was condemned. But he went in anyway. My uncle survived because of him." Lauren's throat tightened. "I didn't know. They don't always tell us about every rescue. Your husband was a good man." "He was." They sat in silence for a moment, but it was different now. Not the awkward silence of strangers forced together, but the comfortable quiet of two people who understood loss. Across the room, Lauren noticed Vanessa watching them with a puzzled expression. She'd expected them to sit in miserable isolation, not to actually connect. Lauren found she didn't care what Vanessa thought anymore. For the first time all evening, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Daniel Reeves had learned that silence was often more powerful than words. In his line of work, people filled silence with assumptions, with projected fears, with information they didn't intend to share. He'd become comfortable in the quiet spaces between conversations. Tonight was no different. He'd known from the moment he walked in that he didn't fit the aesthetic these people expected. That was intentional. He'd worn his second-best suit, the one without any obvious markers. He'd arrived in a regular sedan, not the car that sat in his private garage. He'd given his first name only when checking in. He did this, sometimes moved through the world without the armor of his position. It was enlightening, seeing how people treated him when they didn't know. It was also, occasionally, infuriating. The joke hadn't surprised him. He'd seen Richard Thornton orchestrate it, had watched Vanessa Carmichael deliver her cutting remarks to the woman Lauren, who now sat across from him. He could have intervened, one word to the right person, and Richard would have been mortified. But Daniel had learned that revealing yourself too early robbed you of valuable information, and he'd learned something valuable already. Lauren Hayes had dignity. She'd endured their mockery without crumbling, without lashing out. That took strength. He'd also learned that she was observant. He'd caught her studying him, cataloging details. She was reassessing her initial impression. Good. That meant she wasn't as quick to judge as the others. When she'd asked about his daughter, he'd answered truthfully. Sarah was his world, his reason for everything. After Rebecca died, Sarah had been what kept him moving forward, kept him human. Every decision he made, he measured against one question. What kind of father do I want to be for her? The kind of father who didn't use his position to shield her from reality, he'd decided. The kind who taught her that power meant responsibility, not privilege. The kind who showed up at parent-teacher conferences, no matter what was happening at the office. Who made her breakfast every morning. Who knew all her friends' names. Do you mind if I ask what you do? Lauren's voice interrupted his thoughts. I work in development, Daniel said. It was true, if incomplete. Building projects, mostly. And you? I wait tables. Not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on. Honest work, Daniel said. I've done it. College summers. Something shifted in her expression, surprise, maybe, that he didn't condescend. It's harder than people think, she said. Most things are. They were interrupted by the arrival of another couple at the table, the Hendersons, whose company probably donated enough to warrant better seating. They looked at Daniel and Lauren with barely concealed disdain before sitting as far away as possible and turning their backs. Lauren's jaw tightened. Daniel saw the hurt she tried to hide. They're not worth your energy, he said quietly. Easy to say, is it? Daniel leaned forward slightly. I've found that people who need to make others feel small usually feel pretty small themselves. They're just louder about it. Lauren met his eyes. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone broken, maybe. Someone bitter. Who says I'm not? You don't act like it. Daniel considered this. I decided a long time ago that what happened to my family didn't get to define my family. Sarah deserves a father who's present, not one who's drowning in what-ifs and if-onlys. Some days I manage it. Some days I don't. But I try. That's all any of us can do, Lauren said softly. The presentation was starting, lights dimming, a slideshow beginning on the screen behind the podium. Daniel settled back in his chair, but his attention wasn't on the stage. It was on the question forming in his mind. What was he going to do about Richard Thornton and his cruel little game? As the presentation droned on a series of speeches about community and service delivered by people who viewed both as networking opportunities, Daniel and Lauren continued their conversation in whispers. Emma wants to try gymnastics, Lauren said. But the classes are expensive. And with my schedule, Sarah wanted violin lessons last year, Daniel replied. I thought, how hard can it be? Turns out, very hard. The screeching alone nearly broke me. Lauren covered her mouth to suppress a laugh. Mrs. Henderson shot them a disapproving look. Did she stick with it? Lauren asked. She did. Now she's actually good. Which means I have to pretend to enjoy concerts where 12 kids play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star at 12 different speeds. The price of parenthood. Worth every out-of-tune note. Their conversation meandered through the territory of single parenthood, the logistics of childcare, the guilt of missing school events, the fierce love that made every sacrifice feel inevitable. Daniel found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did at these events. Lauren was easy to talk to, unguarded in her honesty. "Do you ever feel like you're failing?" she asked suddenly. "Like no matter how hard you try, you're always one step behind where you should be?" Daniel paused, considering. "Every single day. But then Sarah brings home a drawing she made, or tells me about something funny that happened at school, and I realize she's turning out fine despite my constant certainty that I'm doing everything wrong. Emma told me last week that I'm the best mom in the world," Lauren said, "and I thought, kid, you have no frame of reference, but it still felt good." "They love us because we're trying," Daniel said. "Not because we're perfect." Around them, other attendees were beginning to notice their conversation. The table had filled in the Hendersons, 2 other couples, and Richard Thornton himself, who'd apparently decided to grace table 12 with his presence. Well, Richard said loudly enough to carry. "Look at the lovebirds. I guess misery really does love company." Several people at nearby tables turned to look. Lauren's face flushed. Daniel felt anger spark in his chest, not at the insult to himself, but at the casual way Richard tried to diminish Lauren. "I don't think we've been properly introduced," Daniel said, his voice calm but carrying an edge Lauren hadn't heard before. "You are? Richard Thornton. I'm on the foundation board." He said it like it was an achievement. "Ah," Daniel said. "The foundation that exists because people like Lauren's late husband ran into burning buildings while people like you stood safely outside." The nearby conversations stopped. Richard's smile faltered. "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly?" Richard asked. "Someone who thinks this charity would be better served by people who actually understand what sacrifice looks like." Richard's face reddened. "That's quite an opinion for someone who's here on a pity invitation. Is that what you think? I know it. We have a whole category for people in your situation. Community outreach." Richard made air quotes. "It's for tax purposes, mostly." Mrs. Henderson laughed a sharp, unkind sound. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Tell me, Richard, how much did you personally donate this year?" "That's none of your business." 50,000? 100? What does it matter? Just curious about the moral authority you seem to feel you have." Daniel's eyes were steady, unblinking. Interesting how much courage it takes to mock people at a table you deliberately set up to isolate them. The silence now was different. Tense. Waiting. Richard stood abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "No," Daniel agreed. "You don't. But you should." Richard didn't walk away. That would have been smart. Instead, he doubled down. "You know what?" he said, his voice rising. "I'm tired of people like you acting entitled to sympathy. Life is hard for everyone. Some of us just handle it better." "Richard," Vanessa said nervously, appearing at his elbow. Even she seemed to sense he was crossing a line, but Richard shook her off. "No, I'm going to say it. This whole event has become a parade of sob stories. Oh, I lost my spouse. Oh, I'm raising kids alone. Join the club. The rest of us managed to pull ourselves together and contribute to society." Lauren had gone very still. Daniel could see her fighting between anger and the desire to not make a scene, to not give these people the satisfaction. "You should stop talking," Daniel said quietly. "Or what? You'll complain to someone?" Richard laughed. "Look around. Everyone here knows how the world works. Some people add value. Some people take up space. You two are at a table together for a reason." "You're absolutely right," Daniel said. "We are at this table for a reason. Though I don't think it's the reason you believe." Something in Daniel's tone made Richard pause. "The absolute certainty of it. The lack of defensiveness. And what reason is that?" Richard asked, but his voice had lost some of its swagger. To see who people really are when they think there are no consequences. Lauren was gripping the edge of the table. Daniel could see she wanted to leave, that staying was costing her something. He made a decision. "Lauren, would you like to go?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They both stood. Daniel helped her with her chair, a small gesture, but one that felt significant in the moment. "Running away?" Richard taunted. "Typical." Daniel turned back. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but something in it made the entire table freeze. "I'm going to tell you something, Richard, and I want you to remember it. The way you treat people when you think they can't do anything about it reveals everything about your character, and yours is profoundly lacking." "Big words from a nobody," Richard shot back, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now. "We'll see about that." Daniel placed his hand lightly on Lauren's elbow, guiding her away from the table. But they'd only made it a few steps when a voice called out, "Mr. Reeves?" Both Daniel and Lauren turned. A young woman in the Foundation's staff uniform was hurrying toward them, her face anxious. "Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up with the seating chart. We didn't realize you'd checked in under your first name only. You were supposed to be at the head table with—" "It's fine, Melissa," Daniel said, "but Mr. Caldwell specifically requested that you—" "Melissa." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "It's handled. Please tell Marcus I'll speak with him later." The young woman nodded and hurried away, but the damage was done. Several people had overheard. Whispers started spreading through the nearby tables. Vanessa's face had gone pale. "Wait," she said. "Reeves, you're not. You can't be." "Can't be what?" Richard demanded, but his voice had lost all its certainty. Daniel didn't answer. He simply looked at Richard for a long moment, a look that said everything and nothing, and then continued escorting Lauren toward the exit. Behind them, the whispers were growing louder. Someone had pulled out their phone. Within seconds, the name was being confirmed, checked, verified. The room was starting to realize exactly who they'd been mocking, and the atmosphere shifted from mockery to dread. Lauren felt numb as Daniel guided her through the ballroom. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what had just happened. Reeves. That name meant something. She could tell by the reactions around them, by the sudden shift in energy. "I need some air," she managed to say. "Terrace," Daniel said, steering them toward a set of French doors. The night air hit her face, cool and shocking. The terrace overlooked the city, lights spreading out like scattered diamonds. They were alone out here, the party's noise muffled behind thick glass. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I should have told you." "Told me what?" Lauren's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. Before he could answer, the door opened behind them. Marcus Caldwell, the Foundation's chairman, emerged. He was a dignified man in his 70s, moving with the careful precision of someone who understood the weight of his position. "Daniel," he said warmly, then noticed Lauren. "I apologize for interrupting. Marcus, this is Lauren Hayes." Michael Hayes, widow. Recognition and respect crossed Caldwell's face immediately. "Mrs. Hayes, your husband was a remarkable man. We've been trying to reach you about the scholarship fund established in his name." Lauren blinked. "Scholarship fund?" "Yes, for children of first responders. It was anonymously funded last year. Full ride to any state university." Caldwell glanced at Daniel. "Though I suppose anonymous is relative in present company." The implication settled over Lauren like a blanket. She turned to Daniel slowly. "You," she said. "You funded it." Daniel's expression was carefully neutral. "The Foundation does excellent work. It made sense to contribute." "How much?" Lauren asked. "That's not—" "How much?" Caldwell cleared his throat. $2 million. Enough for perpetual funding through investment returns. Lauren felt her knees go weak. Emma's college education. The thing she lay awake worrying about. The thing that seemed impossible on her salary. Secured, because of the man who'd been seated beside her as a joke. "I need to sit down," she said. Daniel guided her to a bench. Caldwell excused himself discreetly, but not before saying, "Daniel, the mayor would like a word when you have a moment." "He's heard you're here." The mayor. Of course. Lauren's mind was racing, assembling pieces. The way staff had reacted. The name Reeves. The casual mention of Marcus Caldwell asking for him specifically, "Your Reeves Development," she said. Not a question. Among other things, Reeves Development, one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the state. The company that had built the new hospital wing, renovated the waterfront, created thousands of jobs. She'd seen their name on buildings all over the city. "You're a billionaire." That's an exaggeration. "Multi-hundred millionaire is more accurate." Lauren laughed a slightly hysterical sound. "Oh, well, as long as we're being precise." "Lauren, they put us together as a joke," she said. Richard and Vanessa thought they were mocking two struggling single parents. The charity cases. And you just let them. "I wanted to see who they were," Daniel said, "before they knew who I was. And now you know. Now I know." His voice was quiet. "I know Richard Thornton has no business being on the foundation board. I know Vanessa Carmichael's company is about to lose its contract for the convention center renovation. And I know that you," he met her eyes, "handled yourself with more grace in one evening than most people manage in a lifetime." Lauren didn't know what to say. Part of her was angry at the deception, at not being told, at being part of some kind of social experiment. But another part understood. How many people had probably tried to use him, manipulate him, befriend him for what he could provide rather than who he was. "Your daughter," she said. "Sarah. Does she know?" "She knows I work a lot. She knows we're comfortable. But I try to keep her grounded. She goes to public school, has normal friends. I don't want her growing up like the kids in there." He gestured toward the ballroom. "Like Vanessa's children," Lauren said. "Exactly." They sat in silence for a moment. Inside, Lauren could see people gathering, talking urgently. Word had spread completely now. "You realize you can't hide any more tonight?" she said. "They all know." "I know. And Richard is probably panicking." "I hope so." Lauren surprised herself by laughing. "You're not what I expected." "You've said that before. I mean it more now." Marcus Caldwell returned to the terrace, his expression carefully apologetic. "Daniel, I'm afraid there's been quite a stir inside. Richard Thornton is asking to speak with you. He's rather insistent." "I'm sure he is," Daniel said dryly. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "several board members have already approached me about his behavior tonight. Apparently, this isn't the first complaint, but this is the first time there's been a witness of your stature." Lauren stood, smoothing her dress. "I should go. This is between you and them." "Stay," Daniel said. It wasn't a command, more of a request. "Please, if you're comfortable." She was surprised to find that she was. Despite the revelations, despite the surreal turn the evening had taken, she felt safer with Daniel than she had all night. "All right," she said. They returned to the ballroom together. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The crowd parted naturally, instinctively creating a path. Lauren had never experienced anything like it. She'd been invisible an hour ago. Now, walking beside Daniel, she was suddenly visible, hypervisible. Every eye tracked them as they moved through the room. Richard Thornton stood near their abandoned table, flanked by Vanessa and two other board members. His face had gone from red to pale, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead. "Mr. Reeves," he began, his voice strangled with forced politeness. "I had no idea you were attending tonight. If I'd known, you would have treated me differently," Daniel finished. "Yes, That's rather the point. I meant no disrespect. The seating was a simple misunderstanding. The seating was a deliberate attempt to humiliate Mrs. Hayes and myself because you believed we were beneath you. The nearby crowd had grown. This was better than the scheduled program, a real-time social execution. I apologize if my words were taken out of context, Richard said, deploying the classic non-apology. Your words were perfectly clear, Lauren found herself saying. Everyone turned to her. She felt Daniel's subtle nod of encouragement. You said life was hard for everyone, and some of us just handle it better. You implied that my late husband's sacrifice, that our loss, was just another sob story. Richard's mouth opened and closed. I didn't mean. You did, Daniel said quietly. You meant every word. You just didn't think there would be consequences. Marcus Caldwell stepped forward. Mr. Thornton, I think it's best if you submit your resignation from the board effective immediately. What? Marcus, you can't be serious. I'm quite serious. Your behavior tonight was unacceptable. But more than that, this is the third complaint I've received about your conduct toward recipients and their families. I've been looking for a reason to address this. You've now provided it publicly. Vanessa touched Richard's arm. Richard, just apologize properly. I'm sure Mr. Reeves doesn't want an apology, Daniel finished. I want accountability. There's a difference. He turned to address the wider crowd, his voice carrying without shouting. I come to these events because I believe in the cause, but I don't believe in systems that use charity as a social ladder, where donors think their money buys them the right to demean the people we're supposed to be helping. Murmurs of agreement, heads nodding. Richard and Vanessa were being slowly isolated by the shifting social currents. The foundation serves firefighters, police, EMTs, people who risk everything for strangers, Daniel continued. People like Michael Hayes, who saved my uncle's life, and we dishonor them when we turn their families into punchlines. The room had gone completely silent. Lauren felt tears prickling her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being defended, of having her dignity restored publicly after it had been publicly attacked. Mrs. Hayes, Daniel said, turning to her, would you like to stay for the rest of the evening, or would you prefer I have my driver take you home? It was a choice. Power handed back to her. Lauren appreciated that more than anything. I think I'd like to stay, she said. I want to see the presentation about my husband. Then that's what we'll do. Daniel offered his arm. And we'll sit at the head table, where we should have been from the start. The transformation was complete within minutes. The same people who had ignored Lauren and Daniel now couldn't approach fast enough. Hands extended, business cards appeared, invitations materialized. Mr. Reeves. I'm Jonathan Pierce with Pierce Properties. I'd love to discuss the new waterfront project. Mr. Reeves, my firm handles investment strategies for high net worth. Daniel, it's been too long. We really should get the families together. Daniel navigated the sudden attention with practiced ease, politely deflecting most approaches while keeping Lauren at his side. She watched in fascination as the same room that had dismissed them now competed for their attention. Vanessa appeared, having apparently decided that throwing Richard under the bus might salvage her own position. Mrs. Hayes, I want to apologize for earlier. I was just joking around. I didn't mean anything by it. Yes, you did, Lauren said calmly. And that's okay. Now I know who you are. Vanessa's smile cracked. She retreated quickly. They made their way to the head table, where Mayor Patricia Lynn was waiting. She greeted Daniel warmly. Clearly, they knew each other well, and turned to Lauren with genuine interest. Mrs. Hayes, I never had the chance to meet your husband, but I reviewed his service record when we were considering the memorial grant. He was extraordinary. Thank you, Lauren said. He would have been embarrassed by all this attention. The best ones usually are. The mayor glanced at Daniel. Present company included. Daniel fights me every time I try to recognize his contributions publicly. I prefer effective philanthropy to photo opportunities, Daniel said mildly. Throughout dinner, Lauren observed how Daniel handled his position. He was courteous but firm, generous with his time but protective of his boundaries. He remembered names, asked thoughtful questions, and deflected praise. This was someone who had grown into power rather than been born into it, she realized. Someone who remembered what it was like before. The presentation began after dinner. Lauren's throat tightened as images of Michael flashed on the screen in uniform, receiving commendations, laughing with his crew. The tribute was tasteful, focusing on his service and sacrifice. When it ended, Daniel leaned close. "Are you all right?" "I am," Lauren said, surprised to find it true. "This is the first time I've been able to celebrate him without it feeling performative. Thank you for that." "You gave me something too," Daniel said. "What?" "A reminder of why this matters. It's easy to get lost in buildings and contracts and board meetings. You lose sight of the human element. Tonight, sitting at that table, being treated like we were." He paused. "It reminded me why I started this work in the first place. To give back to a community that gave my family so much. Your uncle. The one my husband saved. My uncle raised me after my parents died. He was everything to me. When he was trapped in that building, when I got the call that he'd been pulled out safely," Daniel's voice roughened. "Your husband gave me more time with the person who mattered most. There's no way to repay that. But I can try to honor it." Lauren understood then. The scholarship fund, the foundation support, the quiet work behind the scenes, it wasn't noblesse oblige. It was personal. "Michael would have liked you," she said. "I wish I'd had the chance to thank him personally." The evening wound down. People continued to approach, but Daniel skillfully extracted them after an appropriate interval. As they walked toward the exit, Richard Thornton sat alone at a distant table, his career in social ruins, his phone likely already filling with calls from people distancing themselves. Lauren felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just a quiet sense that justice, however delayed, had arrived. "Can I give you a ride home?" Daniel asked as they reached the lobby. "That's not necessary, Lauren." He smiled. "It's late, and you were kind enough to tolerate an evening that became far more dramatic than either of us anticipated. Let me at least make sure you get home safely." She found herself nodding. "All right, thank you." Daniel's regular sedan turned out to be a Tesla Model S, comfortable but understated. His driver, a man named Carlos who greeted Lauren with warm professionalism, navigated the streets while Daniel and Lauren sat in the back seat. "I need to ask you something," Lauren said as the city lights streaked past. "And I want an honest answer." "All right. Why did you let it go on so long? You could have shut down Richard immediately." "Why wait?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering. "Two reasons. First, I wanted to see how far he'd go, how he treated people when he thought there were no consequences. That tells you who someone really is. And second, I wanted you to see it too, to see that their judgment of you had nothing to do with your worth, everything to do with their insecurity." Lauren absorbed this. "That's actually kind of thoughtful. In a manipulative psychology experiment sort of way, I never claimed to be simple," Daniel said with a slight smile. "I run a multi-state development company. Manipulation is part of the job description. I just try to aim it at people who deserve it. Like Richard. Exactly like Richard." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lauren asked the question that had been forming all evening. "What happens now?" "What do you mean?" "With us." "This." She gestured between them. "You're 100-millionaire. Multi-hundred millionaire. Fine, multi-hundred millionaire. And I'm a waitress with a daughter and a 15-year-old Honda. We exist in different worlds." "Do we?" Daniel turned to face her fully. "Because from where I'm sitting, we're both single parents trying to raise good kids while honoring the people we lost. The dollar amounts in our bank accounts don't change that. Everything changes that. You can't possibly understand what my life is like. You're right, Daniel interrupted. I can't. But you can't understand mine either. You have no idea what it's like to wonder if people are spending time with you or with your money, to question every friendship, every conversation, every gesture, to wonder if your daughter's friends actually like her, or just like the things she can provide. Lauren fell silent. She hadn't considered that perspective. I liked talking to you tonight, Daniel continued. Before you knew who I was, you were real, honest. You didn't perform or posture. Do you know how rare that is in my world? I wasn't trying to impress you. Exactly, he smiled. That's my point. The car pulled up in front of Lauren's apartment building. It was a modest structure in a working-class neighborhood. Through the windows, Lauren could see Mrs. Chen from 3B watching television and the Martinez kids doing homework at their dining room table. Daniel looked around without judgment, without pity. Just observation. This is home, Lauren said, slightly defensive. It looks like a good neighborhood. Safe. Kids playing outside. It's not the penthouse district. Good. Those places are soulless. He turned to her. Lauren, I'm not asking you to change anything about your life. I'm asking if maybe, sometimes, I could be part of it. Take you and Emma to dinner. Let our daughters meet. See if this he gestured between them is something worth exploring. Lauren's heart was pounding. Why? Because tonight, for the first time in 4 years, I had a conversation with someone who saw me as just Daniel. Not Daniel Reeves of Reeves Development. Not a potential donor or business connection. Just a dad trying to figure out how to raise his kid alone. His voice softened. That's worth more than you know. I have Emma to think about, Lauren said carefully. I have Sarah to think about too. So we take it slow. We're careful. We see what happens. Lauren looked at her apartment, then back at Daniel. A year ago, even a month ago, this would have seemed like a fairy tale. Too good to be true. The kind of thing that didn't happen to women like her. But Daniel wasn't offering her a fairy tale. He was offering her something real. Messy and complicated and uncertain. A chance to know someone who understood loss and resilience. Someone who'd sat at that table and defended her when he didn't have to. Okay, she heard herself say. Slow. Careful. See what happens. His smile transformed his face. Yeah, she smiled back. But I'm paying for at least every other dinner. I won't be a charity case. Deal. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number? They exchanged contact information. The mundane gesture felt significant. Good night, Lauren. Good night, Daniel. She stepped out of the car, then turned back. For what it's worth? I liked talking to you before I knew who you were too. 3 months later, the Sterling Heights Charity Gala was a distant memory for most people. But not for everyone. Richard Thornton had resigned from the foundation board, from his position at his firm, and had relocated to another state. Last Lauren had heard, he was working in his father-in-law's insurance office in Nebraska. The fall from grace had been swift and complete. Vanessa Carmichael still lived in the area, but her social standing had taken a significant hit. Her company had indeed lost the convention center contract. She'd sent Lauren a formal apology letter, which Lauren had read once and then filed away. Some things didn't require a response. The foundation itself was thriving. With Daniel's continued support and his insistence on structural changes to how recipients and their families were treated, the organization had nearly doubled its impact. Marcus Caldwell called it a renaissance. Lauren sat in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, watching Emma and Sarah play in the small attached park. The two girls had become fast friends, united by their shared experience of single-parent households and a mutual love of terrible puns. Daniel sat across from her, reading something on his tablet. They did this most weekends, now found quiet places where the girls could play and the adults could simply be. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. The silence was comfortable. "I got a letter yesterday," Lauren said. Daniel looked up. "Good news or bad? Weird news. An invitation to speak at next year's gala. About my experience. About Michael. That's wonderful. You should do it. I'm not a public speaker. You're a woman with a story worth telling. The rest is just practice." He paused. "I'll be there. Front row." Lauren smiled. "You say the cheesiest things sometimes. It's a gift." Their relationship had unfolded slowly, just as they'd promised. Dinners, movies, park days with the girls. Conversations that stretched late into the night. Daniel had met Lauren's sister, her close friends, Emma's teachers. Lauren had been introduced to Sarah's grandparents, Daniel's business partners, his small circle of actual friends. There had been challenges, moments when the difference in their circumstances created friction, times when Lauren felt overwhelmed by Daniel's world, or when Daniel's demanding schedule made planning difficult. But they'd navigated it by returning to what had connected them that first night: honesty, respect, and shared understanding of what really mattered. "Mom, did you see that?" Emma called from the park. "Sarah taught me how to do a cartwheel." "I saw. That was great." Daniel watched his daughter demonstrate her own cartwheel, slightly wobbly but enthusiastic. "She's been working on those for months. Emma will probably be teaching the whole playground by next week. She's fearless when she finds something new. Like her mother." Lauren gave him a look. "I'm probably the least fearless person you know. You showed up to that gala alone, knowing you didn't fit in, because you wanted to honor your husband. You sat through mockery with your head high. You gave me a chance despite every reasonable instinct telling you it was too complicated." Daniel reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "That's not fearlessness, that's courage. There's a difference." Lauren turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. 3 months ago, she'd been sitting at a table meant to isolate and diminish her. Now she was here, in this moment, with this man and their daughters, building something she'd never thought possible. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Often. Do you regret how you handled it?" Daniel considered. "No, because it led here, to this." "They meant it as a joke," Lauren said softly. "Best joke anyone ever played on me." Across town, in a restaurant where the old crowd still gathered for brunch, Vanessa Carmichael sat with former friends who now treated her with cautious distance. Someone mentioned seeing Lauren Hayes with Daniel Reeves at the theater last week. "I heard they're serious," someone said. "I heard he practically lives at her apartment half the week," another added. Vanessa said nothing. What could she say? She'd been there that night. She'd participated in the joke. She'd learned, too late, that the universe had a sense of humor darker than any prank they could devise. The irony wasn't lost on her. They'd seated 2 people together to mock them, to reinforce their own sense of superiority. Instead, they'd inadvertently introduced 2 people who genuinely connected, who built something real from a moment of intended humiliation. The joke, it turned out, had been on them all along. Back at the coffee shop, Sarah ran up to the table, Emma close behind. "Dad, can we get hot chocolate?" Sarah asked. "It's 60 degrees outside." "Hot chocolate doesn't have a temperature requirement," Emma said seriously, and Daniel laughed. "She makes a compelling argument." He looked at Lauren. "What do you think?" "I think we're outnumbered." "We are definitely outnumbered." As Daniel went to order the drinks, Lauren watched him interact with their daughters, patient, engaged, present. She thought about the man at that table 3 months ago, quiet and underestimated. She thought about her own journey from that night to this morning. The world still had its Vanessas and Richards, people who measured worth by appearances and bank accounts. But the world also had this: a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, 2 girls laughing over cartwheels, and 2 adults who'd found each other in the least likely circumstances. Emma climbed into the chair next to Lauren, stealing a sip of her coffee. Sarah says her dad is rich, she announced casually. Lauren nearly choked. Emma, it's okay, Mom. I told her we're rich too. Honey, we're not. Sure we are. We have each other. Emma looked at her mother with the absolute certainty of 8-year-old logic. That's what being rich means. Lauren pulled her daughter close, kissing the top of her head. You're right. That's exactly what it means. Daniel returned with hot chocolates all around. He settled into his chair, Sarah leaning against his shoulder, and raised his cup slightly in Lauren's direction, a toast to unlikely beginnings and improbable endings. Lauren raised hers in return. The girls immediately started planning their next adventure, something involving the zoo and possibly adopting every animal there. The adults exchanged knowing looks over their heads. It was going to be a long, wonderful day. Somewhere across town, Richard Thornton's phone showed a news alert. Reeves Development announces major scholarship expansion. He stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it unread. Some lessons came too late. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. Some jokes stopped being funny the moment you realized the punchline was you. But for Lauren and Daniel, for Emma and Sarah, the story that had begun as someone's cruel entertainment had become something neither of them had expected. A second chance at happiness built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that true worth had nothing to do with the tables where you sat. It had everything to do with how you treated people when you thought no one was watching, and who you chose to become after life had taken everything away and asked if you had the courage to try again. They did, and it was enough.